Welcome to Revelations with Erin Pizzey. On this show, we will be exploring the issues faced by men and boys everywhere. Your host, Erin Pizzey, opened the first ever domestic violence refuge for battered women and children in Chiswick, England. What she found, however, was that many of the women coming into her shelter were as violent as the men they were fleeing. Over the years, she also tried to create resources and safe spaces for men as well as women, but frequently met with indifference and hostility to men's suffering.
For so many years, feminists have been able to demonize men under their artificial argument called patriarchy. Hi, I'm Erin Pizzey, and through working with battered women in my refuges, I saw for myself how family violence is passed on from one generation to the next. Quite simply, violent behavior is often carried forward into adult relationships. Family violence is not a gender issue, and never was. It's a generational issue. Feminists have had people believe that men are responsible for all the violence in our society. There is sufficient evidence that both men and women can be equally violent in their personal relationships.
The truth is that men and boys are not privileged in our society, but are often marginalised, disadvantaged and ignored. Welcome to Revelations with Erin Pizzey and her co-host, Dean Esmay.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Saturday, March 1st, 2014 edition of Revelations with Erin Pizzey. My name, as always, is Dean Esmay, your co-host, Erin's co-host. And say good morning, Erin.
Well, good afternoon. It's 6 o'clock here in London.
Well, it's morning somewhere, isn't it?
Yes.
As they say. How have you been doing the last couple of weeks, Erin?
Fine, actually. The weather's cheered up. My daffodils are out. This is March the 1st, I think. And if it comes in like a lamb, it goes out like a lion. So we should have some good weeks ahead of us.
Oh, well, for once, I can't say the same. We're looking at record cold here in Michigan. And we're having a snowstorm tomorrow, a blizzard, in fact. So wonderful. But that's all right. I like it here anyway. Today, Erin, we have a special guest, as you know, Professor Miles Groth. He's a professor of psychology at Wagner College. Are you on the line there, Professor Groth?
Yes. Hi, Dean, and hi, Erin.
Hey.
Hello.
Can we call you Miles?
For sure.
Okay. And also joining us in a few minutes is going to be Paul Elam, because the publisher of A Voice for Men, because we're going to talk about the upcoming men's conference in June in Detroit. In fact, why don't I go ahead and bring Paul in so we can kick off with that in just a moment. I do want to mention Miles's main passion as a professor for the last few years has been, in fact, concentrating on men's issues and boys' issues on campus. So that's mostly what we're going to talk about. And I imagine he'll be talking about that at some detail at the conference in June. But let's bring on Paul. Paul, are you available?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Okay, so as most of our listeners may know, but some may not, in June, at the end of June, we're going to be having the first international men's conference exclusively devoted to men's issues that is inclusive of all men's issues, or as many as we can hit. So that's going to include, of course, domestic violence and sexual assault and things like that, but also education, paternity fraud, a whole bunch of things. Why don't you tell us something about it, Paul?
Well, that's a general idea, Dean. I mean, I was, matter of fact, speaking with Tom Golden last night, and we were trying to do our best to condense an overview of what we thought men's issues to be. And it's a long, long list. So we're going to try to hit in June on most of the basics that we think are going to be most relevant to the interest of men in our community and to the women in our community. And it will go along the lines of course, Dr. Groth, as nobody else can speak to the experiences of young men in education, We will have Barbara Kay talking about the anti-male bias in media. We will have Dr. Warren Farrell talking about boys. Karen Strawn will be talking about feminism. Paul Nathanson, Dr. Nathanson, will be talking about misandry in culture. We will also have Dr. Tara Palmatier, who will be speaking at length about the experiences of men who are in abusive relationships with women. I will be talking about activism itself, and in particular, the ways that men manage and deal with stress and anger in activism, which I think is a very important subject. Robert Franklin will be talking about family law, corruption in the family courts. And I know I'm doing all this off the top of my head. I am leaving people out. Senator Amy Pools, yes, and Carnell Smith will be talking about paternity law.
I think someone named Erin something or other will be there to talk about something or other too, won't she?
I'm slapping myself in the face. Erin Pizzey.
Hello. I'll be there.
Also to talk about domestic violence in general, I think. I don't know if they've worked out between them how they're going to do it. Dr. Palmatier works exclusively with men, well, with people involved in abusive relationships with women. I suspect Erin will be talking along similar lines, but from probably a slightly different perspective.
Yes, I think you're right. It'll be a generational perspective and looking at the whole issue of how we need to completely change our attitudes towards domestic violence.
All right, well, that's excellent. Miles, do you know what in particular you plan on talking about?
I also talked with Tom Golden a few days ago, and the exact topic hasn't been narrowed down. We're just exploring it to see what will best complement all of the other speakers and all of the other topics that will be dealt with. But most of all, I hope there'll be a place for me to talk about the current atmosphere on American and Canadian and Australian and other countries' university campuses towards young men, and how those attitudes affect their engagement in work and their success as students and their prospects for being active, contributing citizens after graduation. So I'll be focusing on the college scene, the college university scene, the university atmosphere, and how our young men are treated, how they respond to the way they're treated.
Well, we will have people there from Australia, from the United Kingdom, from Canada. We have some folks coming in from India. I believe we have some folks coming in from South America, or at least Central America. So it should be quite a time. Now, and with a lot to learn and a lot of opportunity to meet people.
And Dean, if I could just add, we all, in that light, we are having on the 26th, which is a pre-conference day. Warren Farrell will be doing a pre-conference workshop on that day. That evening, we are going to have, and it's free to the public and open to the media who we will be inviting. There will be a panel discussion about the news media bias against men, where we will have our news representatives from Canada, from the United States, from India, from the United Kingdom, from Australia, from various other parts of the world. This is going to be a very large panel discussion of news people that will be discussing how misandry and how for lack of a better word, ignorance of men's issues and bias against men in news coverage occurs in different places across the world with Detroit media attention. That will be filmed. I'm looking very much forward to that as well.
You know something, though, I wanted to say that I find it absolutely shocking, in a way, sitting listening to you, that we have to have this conference at all. Does that not strike you? I was going to ask Miles that at this point in the 21st century, we have to have a conference to warn people about the situation with men.
I understand just exactly the sense of your question, Erin, and it is a sad commentary that something outside of academe and something outside of the popular press and media, the standard media, has not occurred and has not occurred with the vigor that is needed, and that such a special conference is required. It's a failure within academe, and I'll say something more about that later, but it's also a failure within culture, within our society itself, to have overlooked the well-being of boys and men. So it is pretty extraordinary, but I think having this conference, and with the result of it being a widened awareness, and again, only the media can provide us with that, that a little chink will have been opened so that more light can get in on the subject. So the conference is really necessary, but the door has been completely closed up to this point. Is pretty shocking, Erin. Yep.
What do you think about it, Dean?
Well, it's funny. I talk to people in various parts of academia, including on this show and sometimes elsewhere, and we sometimes find academics, like I remember Professor Don Dutton seemed to feel that his young generation of psychology grad students up there in British Columbia were fairly open-minded, and that we might see some positive changes coming from that generation. On the other hand, it's astounding. A lot of people probably don't know, but Dr. Groth just spent the last several years of his professional career trying to start a men's studies course, a set of, series of courses to study men and how they really are outside of any ideological indoctrination. And once it was announced, there was what I would consider a very hysterical reaction against it in the public press, as if it was all a bunch of misogynistic, hateful nonsense. And it was, all these things they were saying were nonsense. We're a hate group and all that, which is nonsense too. Not even true. We've never been labeled a hate group, and Miles isn't part of us anyway. I may sound like I'm rambling here, but the point is, the bottom line is the university wound up dropping support completely. I don't think directly because of the hysteria that was in the media so much as they just didn't care. That's the strong impression I get. Well, you don't have an immediate rush of hundreds of people wanting to take these courses. Screw it. We're just going to pull the plug. At least that's the impression I get. Well, is that fair, Miles?
Yeah, I don't have access to the admissions office at the University of South Australia, where this online course actually it would have been a series of 8 courses was to be initiated. So as for how many people enrolled, I have only hearsay. I have no idea, and the university has simply said that the courses would not be offered. My conclusion is that it was under the pressure of those media events that you mentioned. And the people who worked with me there in Australia, I should say the people I worked with there in Australia, have told me that the university pretty much knuckled under as a result of unfavorable press, regardless of any other factors. And as you know, online courses can be done for 3 people or for 30 people, and so I don't think, particularly when you're trying something new and have had no enrollments before, that if the interest is really strong, that you would not give it a go and then see what sort of following you'd have. So I'm convinced that this was very much a failure of heart and spirit there at the university, but I don't have data from admissions to confirm that. But the university can be that easily cowed by one paper article, which is what happened. I think we have to conclude that academe, and that's where I've spent 40 years of my life, academe is not in the position that it once was to provide open and free discourse about any subject, and regardless of how difficult, controversial the subject may be, academe until recently, and I'm going to say 25 to 40 years, depending upon how you're framing the question, academe has abdicated its place as where anything goes, as long as the exchanges are rational and respectful. That's changed, and now certain topics are simply forbidden, and this is one of them. When you bring up an issue of boys' well-being, or even campus young men's well-being, to say nothing of older men's well-being, fathers and the like, it's immediately brushed as being negative and anti-something. So I'm sorry to say that happened, as Dean has pointed out, that the program has been scuttled. And I don't really see anything it's like in a university being formed in the near future, until we become once again a place, academe has become again once a place where topics can be raised without fear of their being censored.
Miles, I don't see how that can happen at all, because 40 years ago, that takes us to the 70s.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, I'd say from about 1970 on, right?
Okay, because I was then touring America. At one point, I did 22 cities, and I was hosted at a lot of universities before they discovered that I was not a feminist. Now, what I saw happen in England, almost seamlessly, the Marxists in the universities simply moved the goalposts again, and because Marxism had been completely bankrupted by evidence, they seamlessly moved on with the feminist movement. And since then, since those days, the universities have been the place where young women have come in and been brainwashed over the last 40 years. You now have professors, women professors, rampant radical feminist women professors who have tenure. How are you going to make any changes unless there is some incredible form of revolution?
Absolutely. I am of the same mind, and I raise that question to myself and to my colleagues regularly. The only thing I can say is that it's a failure of courage on the part of many of my colleagues in academe throughout the North, throughout North America and UK. I'm more familiar with and Australia, most familiar with those three places.
No.
Many will say that they agree with me privately, but they will not risk, even tenured faculty will not risk speaking openly about these issues in a faculty meeting or even in a department meeting for fear of being ostracized and marginalized and branded as a certain kind of anti-feminine, anti-woman individual. So I would characterize it as a kind of lockjaw. What's that illness where everything, your body freezes up? People's capacity to talk openly on this topic is hindered now for fear of being branded as hateful toward women, and until that irrationality can be dispensed with, I think we're stuck with a worldwide institution that's not going to be able to do anything. A revolution, who's going to make it? I don't think it will be
Miles. It'll have to be men with women who support them. It'll have to come from men taking back the academic positions. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. Because part of this... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But I don't think that they're going to do it. I don't think that, for example, in my case, I attended the first gender studies minor meeting of my career there about 15 years ago, and was effectively asked not to come back. I teach 2 courses in the minor, and one other male faculty member never attended one of those meetings. I was not welcome, and my courses, they passed the faculty academic content committee. They're well attended, and yet there's no discussion of them, and I'm pretty much sneered at when I walk past my office, which is also the men's center on campus. I wish I could be optimistic, Erin, that the men in academia will speak up, but they're very much like men in society in general at this point, and for that reason, I'm really doubtful that it will happen.
Well, if I could interrupt for a moment. Actually, first off, I'm going to let everybody know that we are new to the Live 365 platform we're using, so there are a few bumps in the road, and please be patient with us as we get better with things like getting chat rooms and things like that going. We do have a chat room going if you want to join us through the chat room right now. We don't have the ability to take calls. That will be coming soon. But if you go to avoiceformen.com/chat, that's avoiceformen.com/chat, you can come into a chat room there. Just put your name in and say you want to go on, use the web interface, and I'll be monitoring the chat room if anybody has anything they want to say or ask.
Dean, I have some things I'd like to add to this as well.
Okay, and I will let you do that in just a moment, if you don't mind. I'm gonna give my little 2-minute ramble for anybody who's new to the Voice for Men station on Live 365. Or is coming into this fresh. We are talking about the issue of men in education and men's health, mental, physical, spiritual, whatever in general. And people think there aren't men's issues. But my 2-minute spiel on that is usually people need to know that men make up the vast majority of suicides. They make up the vast majority of the homeless. They make up a good, depending on how you want to look at it, anywhere from a third to half the victims of domestic of sexual assault. The majority by far, if you include prisons. They're the majority of people in prison. They're among the majority of the homeless. They're among the majority of the drug addicted. They are a majority of the unemployed. They are an increasing minority on campuses. They're more likely to drop out of high school. There's fewer and fewer of them even going to college at all. We're talking about a 60-40 ratio female to male now, with men a constantly decreasing minority. And yet in academia, there is no interest whatsoever in addressing these things, except a ridiculous program, by the way, being put together by a Michael Kimmel in New York. We'll probably talk about that. But if you're wondering what the heck we're talking about and why we're saying the universities aren't doing a damn thing, it's because they aren't. Everything I just told you about what men and boys are going through is pretty much a verboten subject on American, Canadian, UK campuses. When Professor Groth even tries to talk about them, let alone do something about them, he just gets the reaction you just heard him describe. He gets sneered at or ignored. And this is a common thing going on our campuses. With all that said, what did you want to add, Paul?
Well, I wanted to add, I certainly agree with Erin. It just seems almost surreal that in 2014 that we're sitting here discussing a first ever conference of its kind, which there have been other conferences and talks on men's issues. But to this particular collection of people, which includes a lot of activists, together with academicians and with politicians and noted authors, all in one place, the fact that this is the first time this has happened is rather remarkable. But I feel a little more hopeful than what I'm hearing now, to tell you the truth. I remember that Jim Crow laws were in my lifetime. And before that, shortly before that, we had internment camps during the war. We had rashes of lynchings. We had a time where it was unthought of to sit and debate the issue of whether or not it was moral or immoral or should not be legal to own another human being. As a human species, we've proven generation after generation that we have many, many lessons to learn in terms of bigotry and in terms of class power. And so we learned that the more things change, perhaps the more they stay the same. But I recall that if you think about it, Seneca Falls happened in, I think, 1852. It was 70 years after that before the 19th Amendment was passed in the United States, giving women the vote, and another 50 years after that before gender feminism reared its ugly head in our academic institutions and began gaining real political and educational clout. These things don't happen overnight. This is certainly not an exception. We have people having written anti-feminist and other literature that are concerned with men's issues going back to Belford Bax over 100 years ago. So this is nothing new. But what I think we do have going for us now is that the corrupt feminist establishment is now the establishment. And that is the moment that something becomes vulnerable to grassroots movements. We have efforts afoot, like we're seeing with CAFE, which is really lifting the dialogue a lot. A Voice for Men is another entity that is beginning to change the dialogue. I watched a news story recently about a teacher here where I live in Houston, a female teacher that was arrested for molesting one of her students, and she was given probation and a fine. And the news crew talked to some of the high school students, and the first two boys that they talked to on camera were outraged, and they're saying, and I'm going to quote you them almost verbatim what they said. The first one said, if that had been a man, he would have gotten 25 to life. And the second one said that women are always getting away with this where men don't. There is a change in the cultural consciousness beginning to happen. And of course, that's where I think all things begin. We can enhance this with things like this conference by continuing what we do at avoiceformen.com, by great people like Miles Groth continuing his efforts, even in the face of this insane resistance. We're going to eventually win this. It's not going to be overnight. But feminism now is the establishment that rules the day. It is the one in control. and a subject, as we saw with those high school students in that news story, and as we see now with organizations like Cafe popping up, which is full of young people that have better ideas and better ideals, frankly, than their predecessors, are starting to lift up their voices for change. A revolution, I totally agree with Erin. It will take a revolution. It will take a small, relatively small group of people refusing to shut up. And that's what we're going to do. So I think we're moving ahead in the right direction. I just think it's going to be slower and a bit more painful than most people anticipate.
Dean, may I make a comment at this point?
Of course. Go ahead, Miles.
I have known Paul for a number of years now, and agree entirely with his assessment. With one footnote to be made to that, and that is my worry about how long it will take. I think, and you compared this to Seneca Falls for women. It has to happen quickly. We really can't wait as long as 60 years, or as long as 40 years, or as long as 20 years, for this reason, that what we're seeing, if my diagnosis is correct, is what I would call a psychosocial holocaust involving males. And by that I mean, let's look at the suicide rates. They have increased in two age groups, young teens and middle-aged men. The overall suicide rate at all ages for males is 4 to 6 times that of females. Those who are not killing themselves are, by virtue of their passivity and their indifference and despair, are dropping out. Many of them are unaccounted for. They're maybe living at home in their parents' basement still. They're wandering about between minor jobs, and their general attitude, even among those I see, for example, in college classrooms, is more and more one is a look of having given up. So I only want to say I think that we need a revolution here, but we don't have the luxury of time. We've got a number of young men, a huge number of young men, and even now middle-aged men, who aren't going to be with us either literally, physically, or psychologically, or emotionally, unless things are remedied very, 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 very soon. Just one other sentence onto my footnote there. One projection, given the fact that we're now at roughly 37% male to 63% female university enrollments, that's U.S., but close to worldwide, 40-60 as Paul mentioned. The projections are that if the trend continues, within 50 years' time, the last male to be awarded a bachelor's degree will turn his tassel. So we've got to do something very quickly. We don't have the luxury of a long time and a long historical process for our young men.
Well, first off, one of the things I'll observe is once it is made clear that the academic establishment does not care, and I think that I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. I don't think I can say that too much. The academic establishment does not care, and the more people who hear that, the more likely it is to penetrate that we can't wait on these people anymore. We've got to do our own thing. We've got to go our own way. We've got to start our own groups. And, you know, I actually suspect that we can paint a very apocalyptic picture, if we wish here, of more and more men just killing themselves or so-called failing to launch. I hate that phrase for a number of reasons, but I'll use it now. Of men just giving up in despair, and it being very dark times indeed, women constantly unhappy that there are supposedly no good men out there, and society and academia falls apart. The other way it could go is men could start creating spaces outside of academe and, you know, a new wave of what I might even call renaissance for young men who just say, screw it to the establishment. I'm going to go find something else. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to go my own way, and I'm not going to give a damn what anybody in authority says anymore. I'm going to find a way to live life on my terms. That to me is actually what the men going their own way philosophy ultimately points to. Because at some point, I think academe and the government institutions, see, here's where it comes together, right? Everybody in government comes out of academe. So eventually government and academe have to react in some way, or they're going to make themselves irrelevant. Where are they going to get their tax base from? When men don't want to work anymore? Where are they going to get their, you know, even the interest in going to college when it has nothing to offer them? You know, I'm being incoherent here. Erin, do you have any thoughts?
Well, one of the problems is if they decide that they're not going to go to university, they're not going to get into an enormous amount of jobs. Because right the way through, all the agencies, all the social services agencies, I know students who are doing their social services exams, and they know before they even start that if they don't toe the line, if they ever tried to say that domestic violence, for instance, is not a gender issue, they won't get their degrees. It is that tight everywhere. And the same when it comes to law degrees. All these degrees. What it's developed is a women's bully culture. And it isn't that people don't want to fight back. They do, but they are just frightened of the repercussions. My feeling, I agree with you, Dean, and Miles, I think that not only will in time, and not that much time, as less and less universities have men on the campuses, young women are going to join with this argument, because most young women and young men go to university not only for degrees, but also to be part of something together. And I have a feeling, I feel optimistic, and I agree with Paul, because I talk to younger women a lot, and I know how many of them are finding it extremely difficult to make any form of relationships. I also know women in their 40s, and the tragedy for them is that they're not going to be married and they're not going to have children, because men, in their own way, even before MGTOW, have been going their own way, actually, for a very long time. So we almost have this dichotomy of a completely other place where men get together and get on with their lives, and they only use women because they know they're sensible enough, intelligent enough to look at what a relationship to a woman means. It means she has total control over him, over his life, over his children, over his income. Now, why would a sane, rational man want to risk that? Anybody got any answers?
Well, I would say that very few rational, sane men would want to risk that. And the more often and more directly that question is put to women, and frankly to people in authority, the quicker it gets an answer. Right now, of course, and this points to something that's very common, any man who dares speak like this gets shamed. And shame is a very powerful weapon used against men, especially young men are vulnerable to it, but really men of all ages, shamed for having the audacity. But at some point, a lot of men just lose the shame and, excuse my French, but just start to say, fuck you. You're not going to shame me into doing something stupid, and you're not going to tell me that I owe you everything in exchange for your vagina. It doesn't work that way. anymore. It's not going to work that way anymore. And I suspect
not forever anyway. I want to make a point that I have to agree with Miles' footnote. I don't think we have the luxury of a timelessness here. We don't have forever to start making things happen. But what I do believe is that things are happening. There is a matter of social physics here at play. Men are starting to check out. We can't ignore the profound social impact and even the financial, economical impact of men being unemployed, underemployed in droves. The Japanese government right now is really, really concerned about the future economic viability of Japan because the young men in that culture have checked out. They've said, we're not getting married. We don't care if we have a corporate job. We're going to, do what we have to do, take jobs at convenience stores, whatever, in order to keep a simple roof over our head and play video games. And they're being shamed nationally for doing it. And the reaction to them from those young men in Japan is the middle finger. They don't care anymore. There is going to be consequences, even if unorganized. There is going to be a need for this culture to recognize that young men have to be educated, and I think it will start being felt very soon economically.
I think it will too. I think that, I do think one of the contributing factors, which isn't necessarily male-centric, is that we have inculcated an attitude over the last 20 or so years, I would say, that everybody needs to go to college. And I'm not sure everybody does. I have a college degree, but in the final analysis, I'm not sure I needed it. But we got this push from the government to get everybody into university, at least in the United States, and that's not necessarily the path to fulfillment in life. And academia as a whole may soon be facing the question of, why are you relevant to the average person? And, not even, certainly to the average man, but even the average person, why are you relevant? Why would I want to send my kid there and have him come out of there with $80,000 in debt and still have to go to work at McDonald's? And the world's already got more lawyers than it can use, and it's already got all the CPAs it can use, and we only need so many history professors. Why is academia relevant at all? That may seem a rude question to a psychology professor, but I think that even academe needs to think about what is its future if these trends continue. And they could well make many of the universities, especially small liberal arts colleges and things like that, just disappear because nobody cares anymore. Well, and I notice, and this is something I'm going to ask Miles about, they are sort of trying to react. A feminist man named Michael Kimmel has started at Stony Brook University, some sort of male studies initiative. But when I look at it, it looks like it's ridiculous. Why don't you tell us about that, Miles?
Yeah, let me just make one quick comment about Erin's observation about women and men on campuses. This is a really important observation. Women, like men, most of them, the great majority of women like men, and they like them around campus because they want a social life as well as education. The liberal arts colleges in the United States are going to close one by one as we see fewer and fewer males attending for this reason. The girls who are applying, and it drifts down, they know who's there, are going to choose to go to a university where at least they'll find some men to date and socialize with. So it's going to drive women away from these colleges. It's not going to drive them away from the larger universities that are preparing them for the professions. But I think in this country where the liberal arts experience has been central to higher education, this is a phenomenon that more and more is the case. And colleges with 2,000 students or fewer are having to deal with this right now. They've been aware of it for 15 years, admissions people tell me, but it's become more of a problem right now. At the University of the state, New York State University, that's a taxpayer-funded, in part, research money also comes in, at the New York State University of New York Stony Brook campus, which is out on Long Island near Manhattan, New York City. For listeners who are not too familiar with the geography, it's about 25 minutes from where I'm sitting. A $300,000 grant was acquired from a foundation, philanthropic foundation in, in New York, to open last fall a center for the study of men and masculinities to be directed by Professor Michael Kimmel, who is the preeminent sociologist of gender in this country. Ray Wynne Connell would probably be the counterpart in Australia. But the center, which was announced in May, has as its primary advisors, advisory board members, Gloria Steinem, Jane Fonda, Carol Gilligan, her husband James Gilligan, and a few others. But that list will ring a bell with
certainly does with me.
Ring a few bells. Ring a few bells, and
it rings them all.
Yeah, agreed.
3 months after that announcement, though, and this only came to my attention yesterday, internally within the state university, within Stony Brook, there was some question about the legitimacy of a program for and about boys and men and masculinity, having as its advisory board predominantly women and predominantly feminist women, highly visible feminist women. I was surprised. I was really, really surprised and actually gratified that something like that sort of response is possible. And I think it must have come as a surprise to Professor Kimmel and to his chair and to the MacArthur Foundation, which forked over $300,000 to start this program. So I did a little looking just to flesh out this point for Dean and for everybody. This much touted program, which did in fact open with a web page before September when classes started here, to date has consisted of 5 two-hour seminars, and that's it. And if you look at the website, you'll see that their discussions group is empty. You'll see that their resources page is empty. You'll see a list of the people who are on the advisory board and the steering committee. But you'll look at the quality of the speakers, for example, and they're quite mediocre. There are few high-profile people, and there are a few people with especially important reputations in gender studies. One or two of them I'm familiar with. But all this to say, this really powerful initiative, presumably powerful initiative, if you take a look at it, it doesn't seem to be doing very well. And I'd like to know in a year's time just how that all plays out. It may well be that people are getting it, that a freestanding program, and it is advertised as freestanding from the gender studies or women's studies curricula there, is known to be, however, fully absorbed in the gender studies and the women's studies department, even though they claim to be entirely independent of it, as Professor Kimmel says. So perhaps that's a sign of something happening. And let me add just one more comment on that, since I'm talking mostly about university situation. Gender studies and women's studies programs are in decline. Some have closed. The enrollments are down, and when enrollments are down, there's less money from the schools, and eventually the programs consolidate. There are at least two signs within academe that there might be some sort of awareness that something's up here that just isn't kosher.
I have a strong feeling, I haven't gone into huge depth on that program there at Stony Brook, but what I've seen and what you just described matches what I've seen, and all I could think was nobody's going to give a damn. Men aren't going to come. Nobody's going to want to be very interested, except a few ideologues. We have an amusing comment from or a rhetorical question from our chat room. Somebody asks, if men stop going to college altogether, I wonder who the feminist groups will say the potential rapists on campus are.
Faculty.
Yeah, I suppose so. They'll just have to start picking on the faculty. The rape hysteria on campuses is just at an all-time high. If you listen to some of these ideologues, you would think a woman could hardly get out of a class without being sexually assaulted in some manner. I'm surprised anybody's brave enough to send their daughters to college because of all the rape every 5 minutes rape on campus. I mean, they even have, like, what do they call it, the co-curriculum or whatever, where they bring young men in and indoctrinate them on how women fear them because men are rapists. Weren't you saying something to me about that, Miles?
Yeah, you can look at academe in terms of its curriculum, its extracurriculum, and its co-curriculum. The co-curriculum, the curriculum are the courses, is the courses, and the co-curriculum consists of what students are encouraged and sometimes required to participate in that does not involve actual classes for credit and so on. And the extracurriculum are things that you can choose to do, and nobody cares one way or the other if you do them. But part of the co-curriculum at universities, and this has been increased, tremendously over the last couple of decades, and there's currently a new wave of interest in this sort of thing. At many schools is, for example, a little play or a film or a seminar or a 1 or 2 hour group where students must go. Not all of them do, but they're told they must go, and where they are shown a play or a film that dramatizes how dangerous campus life can be for women. And of course, the danger is for being attacked sexually or assaulted by a student, a male student. Well, the result of this for 99% of the guys who are sitting there as freshmen, this would be part of their freshman orientation as the co-curriculum, is to look around and first of all ask themselves, who are they talking about? Since maybe 1 out of 100 has ever in his imagination invoked, that sort of fantasy or scenario. I'm sure there's 1 out of 100, but the others, all of them, all but one, are wondering who are they talking about, and how can I take this seriously since it's fictional. It sounds fictional. And then secondly, what sets in is a feeling, oh, well, actually, people are taking this seriously, and now they begin to look at each other, and the smile goes away, and the reaction is, how am I being seen here? How am I being portrayed before I have met anyone, gone to a class, shown my personality, done anything in the classroom, in the dorms, done anything of any kind, right? And at that point, many of them are turned off. I just actually, I give a course on the psychology of boys and men, and I talked about this since we were reading Warren Farrell's The Myth of... And I asked the men in the class whether they remembered that experience and what it was for them. And of course, the class is predominantly women, 28 students, about 5 or 6 guys, and the rest are women. And some of them said they barely remembered it because it seemed so outrageous. And it sort of blurred in with a lot of other things that they had to sit through, drug use, alcohol use, and things like that. And this was also the impression that the girls had. They don't see these young guys as potential rapists. They see them as guys that they'll date, and they know how to say no, and they know they're grown up enough not to need to be infantilized, because this is what this is about. It's essentially part of a huge trend of infantilizing not fully mature, but quite mature young adults. The message the girls get, in other words, is, oh, we can't take care of ourselves. Somebody else has to be on the lookout for us. It's bad for the girls as well as for the boys, and yet it's part of the co-curriculum at nearly every college and university. So that's the story there, Dean.
Oh, fair. Go ahead, Erin.
Miles, I wanted to talk to you about something that's bothered me for a long time. When I was running the refuge, and since then I've worked in other projects, one of the things that I noticed is where there is domestic violence or dysfunctional family life, the boys were so much affected by the violence and the dysfunction. So were the girls, but the boys much more so. And I also noticed that at that point in the 70s, the feminists made a big deal of how many men were in prisons and how few women were imprisoned. And my answer to all that is, boys growing up into men are a great deal more fragile in many ways than girls, not only physically, but through their lifetimes. Now, I don't know if you can help me out with any thoughts on that.
I know that this is a fact. We can look at the male, and I like to call what I am doing male studies, because it firmly begins in an embodied experience of a human being of a certain kind. Whether you're looking at which embryos are spontaneously aborted, far greater number are male. Whether you're looking at the sensitivity to stimuli and disruptive environments in the first 18 months of life, more males are more sensitive to those kinds of disruptions than girls are. Whether you're looking to the so-called Oedipal or period of identification as a male or female, it's far more precarious for males than it is for females. If you look at the situation around puberty, you find that it's far more difficult and demanding for males than for females. Whether you look at the dating expectations or the role of fathers, undoubtedly men in general, males in general, are more susceptible to disruption, including disrupted families. And here we have in the United States a 50% divorce rate, as you know, and 2 out of 3 kids will be growing up in a single-parent family, which will nearly always be the mother, and therefore they'll be missing a father. They're very susceptible to psychological and emotional disruption as a result of not having a father. Probably the missing father is the most significant psychological fact to take into consideration for what's happening in those critical early childhood years and for the rest of their lives. And that would include how they relate to women. Could say more about that, but I would fully concur with you, and I can tell you there's research from the last 40 or 50 years predates this period of the dominance of feminism in the social sciences that had already pointed this out. Society Without the Father of Alexander Mitchell started this, and down the road. So I suppose this is a good. By the way, men also do far worse than women when they lose a spouse. They don't recoup their lives generally as well as women do. At that time, they don't deal with the weakening of their physical strength and their say in society. When they get older, women do far better job of that. So there's no doubt in my mind that men are more susceptible to these kinds of difficulties. They're far more likely, though, than women to pretend that nothing has gone wrong and to live in bad faith, to borrow a phrase from a famous existentialist, to live in bad faith from puberty on, as most men do in our society, is to live inauthentically, and from a psychological point of view, to lead a life that is not satisfying and not good for anybody.
But you know, the outcome of this now is when I work, say, in Brixton, these are parts of London where there are big ghettos, if you like, and you have the same thing, I know, across the Western world. When I'm working there, I do notice that there are now armies of asocial young men, not so many young women, because they're actually on the whole doing well, but we call this the underclass I'm talking about. It isn't the fact that they have been socialized. They have never had any access to anything that gives them any direction. They are fatherless. Their mothers, are the ones I deal with, are largely feckless. So they're a result of many pregnancies, many different fathers, a lot of dysfunction and violence. Now, as men drop out of universities and careers, I think governments are going to be faced with what they're going to do with these armies of unemployable, ill-educated, desperate young men.
They're going to incarcerate them.
Yeah, well, that's where they are now. But how long? We're full to capacity. I know America incarcerates more men than probably any other country in the world, I expect.
That's true.
But, yeah. So I know at this point we're looking at a terrible doomsday scenario, but in my feeling, I actually believe, having gone through this I'm 75 now, for this many years, that we are all beginning. We wouldn't be here talking to each other today if it wasn't that some of us are on our hind legs and a lot of us are going to make changes. And this is, honestly, Paul, what I hope for the conference. This is, I hope, the beginning of a huge international dialogue.
Fingers crossed. That's what I want too, Erin. One of the things that I wanted to add with your original question about the impact of home violence on boys versus girls. A lot of the families that I worked with that were still at that point intact for lack of a better word, highly dysfunctional but intact. When the violence was male perpetrated, when it was the mother that was the victim, I found almost invariably with the boys that were the children of that marriage, that not only were they impacted by the presence of the violence in the home, they were also heavily burdened with guilt for their inability to stop it from happening.
That's right, absolutely. And also, you know, I don't know if you came across this, but an awful lot of the boys that I dealt with and still do are very resentful of the fact that the mother didn't leave.
Right.
And it isn't a question of saying, oh, no, she had no... Yes, there are places to go. For 40 years, there have been places to go. And even if the refuges are full, the police will organize shelters. It's the women who don't go. It's the women who routinely return to the violent relationship, dragging the children with them. And that when it's a question of the mother being violent, promiscuous, this is where you find your rapists and your serial killers.
I think it's important also to just underline that great importance of the father in male development, but also in female development.
Oh, I agree, yeah.
Males, it's well known, again, the research is clear and it's been around since the 1920s and the post-war years in the late 40s, and so this is not new, but that the father acts, in a boy's development, the father acts as a moderating influence. Boys who have had fathers tend to be less violent. They tend to have more control over their impulses, particularly during those really volatile years of adolescence. And sad to say, because of the way that boys relate to their mothers as dependent, as they must be when they're infants and little kids, they cannot easily shift to next seeing her as the powerful representative of society and its laws. But that's been the father's job. And without the father, the boy, in a sense, has nobody whom he can respect and love and be loved by, who at the same time can say, you don't do this and you don't do that here. Psychologically, psychosocially, sometimes even physically, I'm going to hold you still until you get past this point where you're unnerved or confused or enraged. And as Luigi Zoja, in a very great book called The Father, points out, this is known cross-culturally, has been known in the West, and I would hazard to say also in the East, forever. In the absence of the father, which is a really, really new phenomenon that a culture has not faced until ours, we have an unexpected and unpredictable situation for these many, many men, boys who are becoming men now. Never before have we had so many men, except in the period just after World War II, when so many men were killed, and this, I think, was also the case in Britain and Germany after the war. Never had this situation, and so we might look back and see what happened in those earlier periods, but I think this is even more. This is unprecedented. This is an even larger number of fatherless boys whose lives.
But Miles, you know, it's not only. The thing you have to remember, and I was a child in the war, that when the fathers were killed fighting for their countries, the boys and girls had something to remember and a model to live with and to be proud of. What's happened this time, and this is why it's so dreadful, their fathers have largely been ejected from their families.
Yeah, such a good point, Erin, yeah.
Yeah, and also there was a lot of mentoring available in the past from extended family members that
Absolutely.
Now is not there because of divorce and separation. Whole families are removed from each other. So what it's left us in so many cases, and I think this is just as important, it's not just the absence of the father. What we also have is an entire generation of young boys that have been parentified and emotionally incested by their single mothers. Which has
I agree.
effects.
Well, we have that. We also have the fact of, I mean, here's the reality for the average boy. And by the way, this negatively impacts girls in some ways, but we have boys who are essentially raised by single moms and then go to school to be taught everything they know, well, at least all day in school, also monitored by women who are almost all the authority figures. There's less men in K through 12 education than ever. Ironically, feminism just wound up causing fewer men to go into education. They're almost afraid to go into the schools lest they be called pedophiles. So you have this generation of young men who's basically had no man in their lives until they hit college. And increasingly they hit college, and it's mostly women.
Well, it will be all women, because if you don't graduate with a bachelor's degree, you can't go on for a PhD, and you must have a PhD to be hired to teach at a university or a college. So this trend of hemorrhaging away of boys from college will eventually produce a situation in higher education where there will be no men teaching.
Yeah, I mean, of course, not all trends go on forever, and there are ways to reverse them. But I mean, I guess I just wanted to also mention that I'm just trying to point to the experiences of young men, even before college. So many of them have had no father in their lives, and really few male role models except their peer groups.
But you know what is extremely sad, as you said, Miles, for girls, because you know that your father is the first safe pair of male arms that you know. And everything that the girl, the daughter of a man, if you see, like my son and his daughter, she tests herself on my son, Amos. And she actually can, at that age, you know, when girls get to that sort of 8, 9, 10, they get very flirtatious. And there are those safe arms to teach you what's appropriate and what is not appropriate. Now, for so many girls, that doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, absolutely. And they do not, if there is not a couple for a man and a woman, for a boy or a girl to watch interacting over a long period of time, day in and day out, in 100 different situations, they won't have the experience of how an appropriate relationship can be with between a man and a woman.
Yeah, this is true.
You get that from seeing somebody from 6 o'clock in the morning until midnight in all conditions, right?
We have just speaking on the impact of fatherlessness on girls. Some people don't like latitudinal studies because they're always imperfect, but multiple latitudinal studies have shown that the effects of not having father in the home, believe it or not, just not having the biological father in the home, girls tend to go into puberty a year or two earlier. The explanations, there are many theories, but it's been found cross-culturally in so many places that there are a few exceptions. And in many cases, we know young girls without fathers in the home, while they may tend to do better, they're still more likely to be drug addicted, more likely to be suicidal, more likely to be teen pregnancies, more likely to do poorly in school. The list goes on and on.
May I ask Paul? Paul, since this is your bailiwick, why doesn't American culture, why are the media not bringing this information and all of the facts that we have adduced here in the last hour and 15 minutes? Why are the major media not telling the truth about what's going on? Why do we not hear the facts? Why do we instead, for example, hear the old, at the latest State of the Union address, the old quote statistic about 77 cents earned per dollar of males by women? Why do we continue to hear mistaken data when in fact it's so clear and that other data in fact reflect reality? Are we living in a schizoid world?
No, we're living in, I think it is a matter of economic realities. Women control the purse strings in Western culture by far. One of the things that we know in advertising here, which is pretty much the same thing as all media, as news media, as commercial advertising, even our Hollywood entertainment, is that we cannot offend what is considered average female sensibilities. It must be a pro-female message. It must be a message that women want to hear, or they turn off to it. That's a theory, but I think there's some solid grounding in reality to that. It is. We also have the factor that there are so many ideologues in the media now. I mean, the liberal arts colleges are graduating ideologues and sending them into work in journalism, and we certainly have all of that, and that has a tremendous impact. But I read somewhere, and I think it's true, that if you want to understand a culture and its habits, forget about psychology, forget about sociology, study its advertising. And if you look at the advertising in this culture, you will see a bunch of, pardon the expression, dumbass, incompetent men that need to be told by their wives every Tuesday that the real solution to their headache is to take 2 Advil, and they say, yes, of course, honey, you're so smart. This is what we're serving up in this culture because women control the majority of liquidable income in this culture and spending, and we must appeal to their sensitivities or it costs money.
I think that's one reason. I have another, and I'm going to turn it right back to academia. We were recently, Paul and I both actually, were recently interviewed by a reporter for the New Republic, a young woman in her late 20s, early 30s, to ask about the men's movement. And you could tell throughout the process of the interview, she was not really understanding, even, like, she was totally unprepared for the answer she was getting. And I think that's actually a failing on academia's part in the first place to properly educate a generation of young women. She just seemed shocked that we would even be saying some of the things we're saying that, Miles, you wouldn't disagree with. Some of the other professors we brought on the show had disagree with. And here's something else I found interesting. I offered her the contacts of multiple academics who could back up some of the things I was saying, and she didn't take me up on that. So something's happened to the popular culture where, academia is turning people out without crucial information. And then they go on to be reporters, and they assume, well, this is just the way the world is, and...
No, it's called brainwashing, isn't it?
Well...
I think it's also called sales, though, Dean. I think that actually supports some of my point in that, and I've seen this, and I've talked with everybody now from ABC News on down the line, New Republic, all these different entities that have interviewed me. It has always been the same thing. I know that there's the ideological tainting there, and there's no doubt about it, and I agree with you that part of this problem comes from academia. But I think ultimately magazines, publications, news programs do what they think will sell. And empathy for men will not sell. It's why all the fundraising that is done for the domestic violence problem has pictures of beaten and bruised women huddled in the corner in the shadows crying quietly as a plea for help, when the image of a man with his face cut open, which has happened thousands of times, would not raise the same money. Part of it, I talked about this in terms of being sort of gynocentric in nature. Also, part of it is misandric. This culture does not care about the pain of men. We're wired not to care about the pain of men. It's literally hardwired into our system to see an injured man as weak and useless, and an injured woman as an object of sympathy and in need of help. And that basic biology is a very, very difficult obstacle to overcome.
I believe it can be overcome. I really do think, okay, we may have to write off academe for at least a little while, but men's groups are like Cafe, just for example, are forming outside of campuses.
Yep.
Men's activist organizations are forming in Canada, in India, for God's sake. A men's party just got started by, and one of our Indian news director is part of that. Men are waking up, because I think I really think the average man and the average woman can get over this social biological programming if you just make them understand. And unfortunately, though, what it does seem to take to make them understand is, I know I'm pontificating and should be letting you guys talk, but there's something I call the grand illusion. And the grand illusion is this. If you just come to people with documentable facts and reasonable arguments, they will listen and things will change. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful illusion. But
I'm sorry.
Once you recognize that it is in fact an illusion, then the answer is you have to grab people and shake them until their teeth rattle, and then it starts to penetrate. It's what I think, anyway.
Well, go ahead, Erin.
Just going to say, I find with so many men that once their problem is solved, then they tend to walk off and not stay and help other men, which is very different to how women behave. Women tend naturally to network and to share emotions. Men don't. I think there's got to be a whole new education of men to learn how to actually take care of each other, because most men invest all their emotional lives in women, in the women that they choose.
Amen. Absolutely, Erin. I see the broader cure in precisely what you've said. Not reforms within academe, but in a much earlier stage of the upbringing of our children. They're not going to wait until college to learn these things. You're talking about things that are going to be happening when they're 3, 4, 5 years of age.
Yeah.
Back home. And absolutely. If I thought we could hope to prepare teachers and parents, teachers of very young kids and parents, if we could have a part in improving that level of education, I think it would be a great contribution. I had one question to ask, if I might, Dean, of Erin. Tell me what your impression is of why is it that women, most women, who do in fact like men, when they watch the advertising and they watch the sorts of things that Paul was describing on television and films, why do they acquiesce in that response and laugh along with everybody? Why don't women stop and say, well, wait a minute, that guy's face is cut up, and from what has happened to him, we ought to be compassionate. Why aren't women? This is a very broad question, but it's based in those comments about media and misandric representations of men. Why are women tolerating this when in fact they like men?
Well, I think one of the difficulties is we're looking at groups of women now who were children when the feminist movement first came into being. And unlike my generation of women, that we actually were taught to respect and love our parents, and men were automatically given the status of the head of the family. It has changed to such an extent that most women have been brought up to think of themselves as victims of all men's violence, because those are the slogans that essentially were wired into their brains as very small children. And you see, and they are swamped with advertising and also with books and journals, all the usual things, all the magazines that women read, all defying women to ever have any sympathy for men, because here is what men do to women. And the other thing that women are taught to do is to ridicule men. And it's that ridicule that does so much damage, because that is what shames men. And it is encouraged, and it has been encouraged. If a woman dares, I know how unpopular, I've stopped socializing, because you go into a group where there are women and you try and say anything to defend men, and I tell you, you won't get asked again. It's a stony silence goes round the table.
How then will this huge ocean liner be turned around so that that sort of experience does not happen to a given generation, and subsequent generations then would be taught differently, would experience?
Well, all I can say, Miles, is that we, all of us who are part of a Voice for Men, people like you and the people that come to our show, are all in the forefront of making the changes. And for every week and every time that we put all these ideas out in the universe, if you like, that is the only way that we're going to have change. It's tiny, it's small, but like an acorn, it's going to grow.
I forget who said it first, but there's nothing that can stop an idea whose time has come.
Exactly, I agree.
And although it seems small now, and it's easy to get lost in, oh my God, the universities don't give a damn. They just gave all this money to Michael Kimmel, who's worthless, and didn't give, a real male studies program a chance. Well, screw them. There's a number of people out here who are getting louder, and thanks to the internet, can't be shut up. The gates of access to information and points of view like this are no longer under the control of academe or the mainstream media. A Voice for Men just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The New Republic just published a piece on us, and the reporter, to her credit, although she got many things wrong, I'd say she got more than half of it wrong. She got enough of it right, and then got a lot of pushback in the comments from readers about things she'd gotten wrong. And the very fact of talking about us, even though she was not particularly kind, got her a hysterical reaction of condemnation from high-profile feminists, which means that they're afraid. Which means that they're afraid, because then they develop these false threat narratives like we're going to come and rape them and beat them up and chain them to kitchens and whatnot. The fact is that hysterical reaction translates to more and more awareness. And I believe that the more of us who come out and just say what we really think and present these ideas, the more things will change. I don't think.
Or we give permission to others to do the same.
That's right. Exactly. And I do think it's not going to happen in 6 months' time, but I think month by month, year by year, I genuinely believe the next 2-3 years we're going to see a shift in the media landscape. We're seeing it beginning now, and I don't think it's going to stop. And at some point, academia and the government is going to have to face it. The White House recently released a new initiative where they want to help young men and boys of color in crisis. Okay, I can be sympathetic to a certain extent. I don't know why they're not worried about all boys, especially the ones on the lower rungs of the socioeconomic ladder, regardless of rape or regardless of race. But they're noticing, and I think they're going to notice more and more, especially the louder and louder we get. And believe me, Paul, we're going to get louder, ain't we?
Yeah, there's a real important point here, a couple of them. One, Miles asked about, how do we address this within women's culture? And we are already. It's on a smaller scale than I would like, but it is starting to have some impact. The thing that needs to happen is for more women to stand up and shame other women for these kinds of behavior. Point out how hypocritical and bigoted it is to be tolerant of violence toward men, toward humiliating them, toward denigrating them. And we do have several female writers that do exactly that on A Voice for Men and more. And we have begun to see it start translating out there in the internet to more of these objections being raised. I saw something on Facebook the other day, totally unrelated to men's rights, and it was just one of these little memes about how important it was to honor women. And like the second comment on it was, wait, it's not important to honor men too? And it was from a woman. We are starting to see the inklings of this come up, and I think the louder we get and the more audience we reach, the more of an impact that we're going to have on that. The other point I wanted to make was about the Emily Machar article for the New Republic. That was, just as Dean said, she got half or a little more than half wrong. She reduced 3 hours of interviewing to a couple of minor sound bites from each, myself and Dean, and from Karen Strawn. But what she said at the closing paragraph of her article was very, very telling. And it's exactly what I wanted her to write. She said that progressives in this culture, that these issues, whether they liked A Voice for Men or not, that these issues were real. And if progressives in this culture wanted to be a part of the coming dialogue on these issues, they better start speaking up, or places like A Voice for Men were going to own that dialogue 100%. That is the message that I want to push the mainstream into. We have a saying at A Voice for Men: we are the media. We are in many ways. We see the sentiments that are written at A Voice for Men now being expressed on the Wall Street Journal, now being expressed even in Slate and in other places. This is not an accident. We have a growing, robust audience. We're attracting media attention from all over the world. We're attracting support from all over the world. We're attracting women, men, gay, bisexual, transgender. We are attracting a huge and diverse population of all sorts of people that are interested in and concerned in these issues, and they are flat sick and tired of feminist dogma and propaganda and lies, and they're saying so. And that's what we have to keep doing. I would like to see 10 more A Voice for Men out there. And A Voice for Men itself is growing. We now have branches in Ecuador where we just opened ABFM Ecuador, which has the potential to reach over 400 million Spanish speakers. We have several hundred articles that are translated by a Spanish linguist into immaculate Spanish for that audience. We have ABFM Brazil going out in Portuguese. We have ABFM Sweden going out in Swedish. And these sites are starting to pick up and get traffic too. We're not stopping at this. And we're going to get louder, more boisterous, and sometimes even more provocative. But the point is, we don't have to wait for anybody to get this message across. We have the ability, the technology, and now we have the people. We've grown from I'll say this and then I'll get off my soapbox. ABFM since 2009 has grown from a one-man blog to a staff of over, I think, 30 people now, with 4 radio shows, with all sorts of contributions, and we have helped launch and finance the first men's centers issue at the University of Kennesaw in Georgia, with plans for more. We're not being slow about anything. This thing is growing, and it's going to continue to grow, and we're not going to ignore academia. As a matter of fact, we have every intention of driving this message right square into the heart of it.
Well, could I make a comment? Dean and I spoke in advance, and I told him some of the things that I would be addressing and talking about, and this is a good time to mention one of them. I've been to it before, but it's really, I think, really appropriate now, just given what Paul has said. Academe is not on its own going to be the source of change for boys and men. I've come to the conclusion that, for all of the reasons we've discussed and many others, that it's impotent and incapable of doing that. And in fact, to hear you say that it will be the energy coming from outside into academe that will, if possible, turn that particular big ocean liner around, I fully concur. I might not have a year ago. I might have, in the 2 years that we were planning the courses, online courses in Australia, for anybody, not just Australians, by the way, I probably would have had more faith that academe, where I've spent 40 years of my life, would have the integrity, the courage to do it. I'm now convinced that it doesn't. On the other hand, let's keep in mind that a lot of people are still going to be passing through there who are going to be moving into law school in particular, but also into business, into medicine, of course, and other professions. And these people are going to be in Congress, they're going to be in the courts, and they are going to have been exposed to the kind of nonsense that we've been talking about today. So the academe is still an important part of this whole picture, insofar as access to positions of power and authority still to a great extent depend upon having a university degree or two. And given the atmosphere in academe, the skewed experience that these people are getting is going to continue for a while longer. So I suppose if you put the dark side and the bright side that I presented into balance, it's not clear to me how it's going to work, but it seems to me that it will depend upon people like Paul and Dean outside of academe and outside of social services, as Erin is, and I am actually in part too as a psychotherapist. We will count on you. I think that's what I want to say at this point.
Well, we've been going for more than an hour and a half now. It's probably time to start wrapping this up. I want to point out to anybody who's new or been with us for a while, yes, A Voice for Men does continue to grow and is continuing to get more and more attention. We also do actually welcome competition, or not even what I'd call competition. There are other websites doing fine work. There are local groups all over the place doing great work on the ground that we support. I believe we're approaching a critical mass. It may be another year or two off, but I think it's happening. I hear regularly from university students, mostly young men, but also young women, who basically are flying under the radar, but are clearly subversives because they hear and read what we have to say. They see how it doesn't jibe with what their teachers are telling them, and they believe us. And they believe the things they're seeing on other men's-oriented sites. And so I think there's something called preference falsification. I guess we probably don't have time to talk about it, but Miles, if you ever look up something called preference falsification in sociological journals, you'll see it explains how something that seems unchangeable can suddenly change overnight. because everybody suddenly looks at each other and realizes this is wrong and we need to change it. And it can happen very quickly. Can't say when, can't predict it mathematically, but it can happen. And so that's a positive note for me. Did you have any closing thoughts you'd want to share with us, Miles?
Yeah, just on that topic, I have a colleague in Germany who is Gerhard Ament, who has been very active in opposing a strict pro-feminist agenda. He taught sociology at the University of Bremen, and he made the point that you did, which was to me very refreshing, and when I first heard it, surprising. He reminded me, and we're both of the generation of the 60s, I grew up in the 60s, that no one could have predicted that. And there were no indications that such a series of events that brought so many people together and affected the world as it did. No one could have predicted that. It happened, and perhaps that's what he said, and I paused and thought about it and have come to agree with him. Perhaps that's what we're waiting for at this moment with regard to the whole set of issues around the well-being of boys and men. Perhaps this will come as a surprise not only to everybody else but also to us. When things congeal, there's a gestalt will form, something will come together, and here was his caution, but in a way that no one could quite have predicted, not those who were for it, nor those who were against it. So perhaps that's what something imminent is about to happen. Certain things are pressing in one direction, others are, like Professor Kimmel's, pushing against it, but perhaps that's, as you describe it, just what we need to be optimistic in anticipating that suddenly this is going to come together.
Well, obviously I may be a starry-eyed idealist and totally wrong, but I'm going to repeat the words again for our audience. Go ahead and plug it into Google and do a little reading. It's something called preference falsification. Very interesting idea. But with that, I'd like to ask Erin, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Well, yeah, I have a closing thought in that I am going to be so excited at the idea that we're all going to be meeting. It's where you live, isn't it?
It's in Detroit. That's right. In Detroit, late June. What is it? What are the dates again, Paul?
June the 27th and 28th, with a pre-conference workshop by Dr. Warren Farrell on the 26th.
Okay, and you'll find information on that conference on the front page of A Voice for Men, and keep watching because we'll have further updates. I can't wait to see you, Erin. We've been working together for more than a year now, and we've still never been in the same room together, so I can't wait.
It'll be a great moment for all of us. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us on this week's episode of Revelations with Erin Pizzey. Next week, I'll be back here at the usual time with Tales of the Infrared, where we talk about geek culture from a red pill perspective. And then in 2 weeks' time, we'll be back here with Barbara Kay, columnist for the National Post in Canada. Say goodnight, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Take us home, James. You have been listening to Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey and me, her co-host, Dean Esmay. Our show's opening music and closing music is known as Sunshine and Eternal Hope, respectively, and is by Kevin MacLeod and used under Creative Commons Attribution License, with a link in the show notes. We also want to thank James Huff and Paul Elam, and all of those who are part of the A Voice for Men community for their support for this show. Remember, if you're a victim of domestic violence, no matter if you're a man or a woman, gay or straight, adult or child, no matter what your race, your ethnicity, your religious views, your sexual orientation, or anything else, what you went through or are going through now is not okay. You should not be afraid to talk about it with people who understand and care. Just remember to talk to people who do understand and not to ideologues who fear the truth or will marginalize you and your experiences. Remember, the truth about domestic abuse is often painful to hear, especially to ideologues, and especially to those who've been through it and been marginalized and ignored. But remember, in truth, there is hope and healing, and we hope you'll be a part of helping to spread the truth and the healing. Please join us next time on Domestic Violence Revelations with Erin Pizzey and yours truly, Dean Esmay. God bless.